Hello and welcome to the IND podcast with Dennis Dunicic. I want to remind you to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join our growing international community. Now, our report today is going back to the Russo-Ukrainian war, which has had a major development. Russia seems to be shifting its focus and its tactics, primarily to eastern Ukraine, in an apparent recognition that capturing the capital cities of Kyiv, the second largest city of Ukraine, Kharkiv, and other major city and geographical assets of the general country of Ukraine has failed. The Russian Federation is changing its primary goal to capturing eastern Ukraine or the Donbas region, or more specifically, cutting off Ukrainian military forces in the east. Now, understand that the bulk and the vast majority of Ukrainian soldiers and forces are in eastern Ukraine, where they have been fighting Russian separatist forces since 2014, for about 8 years now. Now, the reason for this can basically be construed as Vladimir Putin recognizing that what was intended and anticipated as being a very quick invasion that occurred on February 24th of Ukraine has failed. Russia, notably on the 24th of February, invaded Ukraine from the north, from Belarus and its encampments on Ukraine's northern border in Russian territory, from the east, from Russian territory and Donbas, and from the south in Russian-occupied Crimea, attacked Ukraine in a multi-front offensive. This multi-front offensive was anticipated not just by Russia, but by the vast majority of the international community, of very quickly anticipating the fall of Ukraine's government. Notably, this has not happened. Many major cities such as Kyiv, Kharkov, Mariupol, and others have completely held out and not fallen to the Russian advances. Notably, in parts of Kyiv, Ukrainian forces have even started making advances of their own, pushing back Russian soldiers. Now, the reason for this failure is simply because of the well-organized Ukrainian defense, and also because of its amount of armaments coming from Western nations, and also because of Russian logistical issues that have failed to provide fuel, food, ammo, and other supplies for its soldiers marching on these cities in Russia's ground offensive, and also Russia's failure to assert air dominance over the country. Now, Russia, recognizing the fact that it can no longer occupy the entirety of Ukraine, at least for now, has shifted to lower ambitions that are more realistic. Russia is beginning to encroach upon Ukrainian soldiers in the east in an attempted bid to cut off Ukraine's military forces in the region from the rest of the country, making them unable to get arms, food, and supplies. Eventually, these soldiers would have to either surrender or die fighting with what they have left, giving a full Russian occupation of the territory. Now, understand some background of Donbas. The region of Donbas contains two major provinces that have declared independence and have been acting as separatist states from Ukraine for the last 8 years since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. If the Russian military is able to fully occupy this region, it is going to be able to force Ukraine into concessions which, for a peace talk, state that Ukraine would recognize the parts of Donbas as either independent states or part of Russia, and also Crimea. Now, probably these would be independent states. It seems that Russia's intention and Vladimir Putin's goal here is to establish a West and Eastern Ukraine, not unsimilar to the situation we have with Northern and Southern Korea, dividing the country between pro-Russian and independently Ukrainian or pro-Western sides. Now, while Russia would ideally like to control Ukraine, and this is what would inherently be in the Federation's best geopolitical interest, if that is not possible, the next best thing is to take a good chunk of the country's territory and use it to counterbalance that nation itself by creating a quasi-independent or fully independent state that is opposed to Ukraine. Now, this would be also a massive economic hit to Ukraine, as Donbas is the industrial heartland of the entire country. This would be a huge negative economic impact on Ukraine. Now, Russia's shift in tactics is not just going towards the east, but it has had major ambitions in the south, beginning to set its eyes on the city of Odessa, while also continuing to encroach on its attack on Mariupol, which has been the most brutal in the war, causing the death of thousands of civilians. If Russia is able to completely cut off Ukraine from its southern coast, it will be a massive attack and huge impact against the nation's economy, essentially crippling it and causing Ukraine to have no economic options but to cooperate with Russia. Now, in terms of the East, this actually seems like a more reasonable approach to the war by Vladimir Putin, one that actually has a clear and concise goal that can eventually be reached probably within the year, if not sooner. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also stated that he would eventually be willing to come to some kind of compromise with Russia to the east, and that is now, while Ukrainian forces are still able to fight against the separatist forces in the region. If Russia is able to fully occupy Donbas, Volodymyr Zelensky's negotiating platform is going to be much, much lower. Now, whether or not this tactic will be effective is going to be up to how fast Russian soldiers can actually capture the city of Mariupol. Now, Mariupol has been one of the most brutal and one of the most damaging and casualty-heavy conflicts in the war. The strategically important port city has essentially been completely leveled by Russian airstrikes, and ground forces have been slaughtering each other. Now, if Russian forces are able to capture Mariupol relatively quickly from this day forward and not face too many casualties on their own, what they are going to be able to do is link up with the Russian occupation in the city of Kharkiv to the north. And this is going to allow a pincer movement on the eastern region of Ukraine, which is going to completely shut off the Ukrainian forces. Keep in mind that they're fighting pro-Russian separatists and Russian forces themselves in the east. If they are met in the west and they have Russia to the north, they will be completely cut off. Now, it does seem that this is Russia's intention. Its ground forces seem to be redistributing, with Russian presences being absent from areas where they previously were. It seems that Russia is regrouping and redistributing these forces to focus on an eastern-based offensive. Additionally, Russian airstrikes are focusing less on Ukraine's general cities and focusing more on military and supply targets that are bringing in crucial goods to the east. Particularly, a cruise missile strike attacked Lviv, a city in Ukraine's west, which has seen a very rare amount of fighting, typically being the resort of civilians seeking refuge or other groups trying to bring in goods into Ukraine from other countries. An attack on Lviv is a clear intention to cut off Ukraine's supply routes, and in this case, it seems to be particularly for the east. Now, if Russia's tactics play out well, Ukraine will be cut off economically from the south, it will be cut off economically from the east, and will lose its industrial heartland. Eventually, Zelensky is going to have to capitulate to something, especially if Russia is able to gain a significant amount of territory, not only to save more civilian lives, but to end fighting that's going to lead nowhere. Understand that Donbas has been a place of contention and fighting for the last 8 years. Now, if Ukraine does not want to accept some kind of peace term in the east, what is going to happen is a protracted conflict that is going to take years to finish. And that will be damaging to everyone, especially Russia. It is estimated that Russia has lost between 7,000 to 15,000 soldiers since this conflict began. That is equal, roughly, to the same amount of soldiers the Soviet Union lost in its 10-year expedition in Afghanistan. A major number. Now, it should be noted in a full disclaimer that the Russian military claims that it's only lost 1,351 soldiers, though that number is probably inaccurate. Now, hopefully, everything is going to be resolved by some kind of peace agreement, but the reality is it probably is not going to happen relatively soon. The fighting is, generally speaking, at least as far as ground fighting is concerned, paused for now. Both Russian and Ukrainian forces just need a little bit of a break because fighting constantly is extremely tiring, and two, both sides need to be able to regroup and regain supplies to be carrying out their offenses and defenses in the conflict. But it seems that during this pause, Russia is going to shift its tactics and focus on the east in an eventual bid to create an independent state of, I don't know what it's going to be called, but something around, let's say, Eastern Ukraine or Donbas, or maybe multiple republics that will include Crimea, to counterbalance Ukraine and in the long term, destroy the nation's economy, destroy its will, and eventually push the people through destabilization to becoming pro-Russian. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. Let me know what you think in the comments. Pretty much spill out anything that's on your mind in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.